There we go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Ingrid Boudet, and I'm founder of No More Noise Toronto. And today we're going to take a deeper dive into Toronto's noise data. We're going to talk about city data, police data, health data, your data, and help inform you about what's going on in your city. So I'm going to go into a presentation, and then we're going to come back and we're going to visit the website that I have, where we actually go into this information. So you'll be able to look at it again, and then we'll come back to the presentation, and then we'll hopefully have time for. I'm sure actually we will have time for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to do this one over here, there, and then here. And share soon. Okay. And I'm just going to do this. Okay, excellent. Well, No More Noise Toronto, we are all about creating a more healthy, inclusive, and social city. I'm coming to you from Toronto, also known as Takaranto. And as part of a land acknowledgement, I wanted to highlight these two books. Truth Telling is a book by Michelle Good, and it is a very frank and honest account of how colonialism and colonialism specifically, really how it put Indigenous life under threat through its processes, and it still is doing that today. And how Indigenous people lived on our lands is very different from how we are living on this land. And they lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years. And I believe we have lots to learn from them and also lots of amends to make. The book Sounds of Life is from Karen Baker, and it is a book that talks about how we initially, when we were studying sound, we only thought, well, sound is only what we can hear. Well, no, there's ultrasound and there's infrasound, and Indigenous people listen to nature in a much deeper and more intrinsic way than we do now. And while they couldn't necessarily hear more than humans, they understood how to still listen to nature. And one of the stories in there is how they would listen to whales underwater by putting an oar in the water and up to their jaw, and they could actually hear the whales singing underwater. And I just love that analogy, or I love that story, because to me, there is just so much more for us to learn and respect from their way of life. So I am having a problem with my mouse today. So who and what we are, we're a grassroots organization. We're trying out something new and learning as we go. I'm collaborating with other groups to create a unified front for a better soundscape. Many of the groups that we are working, not in opposition with, but there's many organizations out there. Car Culture is one of them, construction, developers, Amplified Sound, club, restaurant owners, all of those people, they all know each other. So I want to make sure that we all know each other as well. And we're collecting crowdsourced data to give a voice to residents, and also taking measurements to understand noise on a personal level from people's homes. There's a site called the Toronto Open Data Portal, where the City of Toronto shares its data. And on that, they have a guest blog, and they asked me to write my story about measuring sound from the bedroom window. So if you Google that, you'll be able to hear kind of my story. You'll be able to understand my story and how we came to be. I am collaborating with many groups, as I said. Two of significance are Toronto Metropolitan University. I work with Professor Tor Oyama, who's Associate Professor in Department of Geography and Environmental Studies, and is a world expert on urban health noise, specifically traffic noise. His studies have been cited by the World Health Organization. I have a University of Toronto senior geography student, and he is analyzing all of the NOT 311 data right now, and I'll be able to show you a little bit more about that as well. I partner with Esri Canada, City of Toronto, Civic Tech Toronto, Hot Ducks and Citizen Minutes did a short documentary on me, Cycle Toronto, and then there on the right-hand side is a list of a lot of resident organizations that I've also been working with. So noises, we're joining a global movement, really. This has already been going on for many years. There's a lady by the name of Arlene Bronsaft down in New York, and she has been advocating for a better sounding New York City for about 40 years. So there's many people that have been doing this for a long time, but now we're becoming more aware of it. And cities have overall in North America at least been designed to look good, not sound good. All of the concrete, all of the glass, all of the lack of public space and greenery, all makes a difference in how our cities sound and how sound travels within them. And when you've got noisy environments, that creates additional barriers to independence for many people. Bob and I have had many conversations about how sound and light is something that people with brain injuries need to navigate on a daily basis. We both have a friend who's blind, and how she navigates through the city. She initially had a guide dog. Well, that guide dog got arthritis and is now retired, and she's now with a cane. And that's a very different experience for someone. And when I ask her how she feels about navigating the city, her word is terrified. That is not how anyone should feel about having to do their activities of daily living. Noise is also related to climate change. Fossil fuels, when those guys are stunt driving in their cars or they modify their mufflers, they are circumventing the emission controls that were put in place for a good reason. I walked behind a Civic that had one of those big tailpipes the other day, and the guy was just sitting in there and was idling, and he was on his phone, and boy, you could really smell that gas, and it's like, this is not the direction we're supposed to be going, and that muffler is illegal. The other thing is air conditioning. Buildings can be our #1 contributor to greenhouse gases, and I have a balcony. I don't use it. I have windows. I don't open them because it's so loud, and so I hide inside and turn on air conditioning. I am lucky. I get to turn on air conditioning. How many people don't? How many people live on arterials with those, kind of air conditioners that hang out the windows? That's pretty much like having an open window. What about the people who are unhoused? Noise is an equity issue. And so now some cities are taking action and others aren't, or others have the opportunity to. And Toronto is right now in that place where we have the opportunity to do that. It's important. Reducing noise is important because we actually have no defense against sound. We cannot close our ears and our bodies cannot stop listening. And it doesn't matter if we're annoyed or not, notice it or not, wake up or not. When we are asleep and we hear a sound, our bodies can hear that. We may not actually wake up, but if it's loud enough, we wake up because our bodies are always listening. That's how alarm clocks work, right? So we are always taking in sound. So an excessive noise, it's determined now, it's been studied exhaustively, it can cause annoyance. Additional research shows it can increase the risk of ischemic heart disease and hypertension, sleep disturbance. I get that every night, just about. Hearing impairment, cognitive impairment. There's a whole list. It increases anxiety and depression. It inhibits learning in children. It's incredibly harmful to us. And so there's evidence for other health impacts as well. So we really need to manage noise to help protect our public health. So Toronto is in a great place right now because we're actually reviewing our noise bylaws. So the previous bylaw was in 2000, previous overhaul of this bylaw, a really big one, was in 2002, over 20 years ago. This one started in 2015 with a report from Toronto Public Health called How Loud is Too Loud? And then it got stalled during COVID. Then they finished it off last year. This fall, they did public consultations, and the city held 6 of those, and 750 people attended those public consultations. So that's a significant amount. They received over 2,200 emails with feedback. And what we did as No More Noise Toronto is we created templates and easy ways for people to have a pre-formatted email, but to also share their own noise story with the city. And so we believe we were instrumental in part of that 2,200 email number. So noise is going to be discussed at ECDC, or Economic and Community Development Meeting, and that is on January 11th, 2024. It was supposed to be November 28th, but due to that volume of feedback, the city pushed it to January 11th. That will be a very important day for us, and I'll get back to that towards the end of the session. And so anything that comes out of that meeting on January 11th is then going to it goes to City Council for a vote for all the city councilors. So there's 6 city councilors that sit on the Economic and Community Development Committee. Then all of the city councilors will vote on it in early February. So what I did to help us all along on this journey was create a website, and I've created a bunch of information on there. And so the goal was to educate, engage, and equip residents for the noise bylaw review. So here we are. So I'm going to hop right into my website. So I use Esri technology. Esri is that partner that I talked about way in the beginning, and they are a GIS company. They're the largest GIS company in the world, and they make certain things that you can help share your information. So this is what I use a lot. This is a general website, but each one of these is a story all on its own. And so each one of these is basically a web page. Now, when you come here, here's my social sharing tabs. You can sign up for Noise News if you haven't done that already. The next issue is like cooking. It's on the other monitor. So that'll be coming out shortly. So we're going to go, so we've got a short little story on Toronto's noise problem, which is just kind of overall highlights the noise issues. We're going to come back and dig into Toronto's noise data. This is the actual noise bylaw review. So this is all of the things that have happened in the bylaw review process and where we are now, and then help make Toronto a better city is ways that you can participate. I am going to go into the Not 311 noise report as well, because this is the crowdsourced data. This is where No More Noise Toronto is doing things a little differently by asking people to submit reports. If you ever are looking if you are looking at doing a deputation and you want to look at some other information, this tab, Noise Laws, Regulations, and Reports, goes into federal, provincial, Toronto Police, World Health Organization reports. There's a whole bunch of information there. And then here's a tile or a story explaining sound, because sound, we all know it, but we don't really know it. It's kind of complicated. It's on a logarithmic scale and those kind of things. So I try and explain that all in there. And there we go. So let's have a look at Toronto's noise data. All right. So part of my past is that I used to manage data in large Excel spreadsheets. And that information went to executives to make decisions. And I managed those spreadsheets like very, very tightly, because you cannot make good decisions from bad data. So neither can the city. So when I'm looking at how they are collecting data and they are managing their data, what they shared with us in the public consultations in September was this chart. And this chart is their noise complaints. And I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? Now, we all may have our own individual noise source issues, but a very popular one is motor vehicle noise. So when you look at motor vehicle noise and you see that it's only 5% of the complaints, and there was only 2,092 done in like 3.5 years, that makes no sense. Where you look at amplified sound and it's 73% of the complaints. Well, this chart represents data for bylaws that they can enforce. So what does that mean? Well, that means they can't enforce moving vehicle noise. They can only enforce stationary vehicle noise. So this is your neighbor warming up their Harley at 4:30 in the morning that eventually gets caught. That is this line. This isn't the Harley or the modified muffler or the loud performance car, sports car, crotch rocket, motorcycle, whatever it is, going by your house in 20 seconds that wakes you up at 3:30 in the morning. That is not what that number is. And this is what got me going on data. Because if the city is supposed to manage that kind of a noise source, then they need to collect the data for it. So amplified sound, it's clear why that is so high. That's a stationary noise source and it has a long duration. So, okay, that makes sense. Construction noise, same thing, it's stationary and that kind of thing. But still the enforcement for these noise sources is an issue. And the thing is what the columns that you see there. So for example, take Larissa, who was talking about wind power and power generators. Where do they fit in here? And if they're allowed, is she even able to make a complaint about that? Leaf blowers. Leaf blowers are allowed from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. If you have roving leaf blowers coming by your house during the spring and fall every other day, you can't complain about that. The functionality in the app doesn't even allow that. So to me, that means the city is closing their ears on things they don't want to know. and things that they can't enforce, but that doesn't mean they don't need to enforce it in the future. You cannot make full decisions on a partial data set, which is what they're doing here. Next, you know what? I really like this. I get to rant a little bit. So let's take a look at what the information that we got from a Freedom of Information request. So I also mentioned that I collaborate with a group called Civic Tech. And they're these wonderful group of people that like to use their techie skills for civic good. One of them did a Freedom of Information access request. And they wanted to know the number of complaints to 311 and subsequent citations or tickets issued up until the end of 2022. So this is bylaw officers, not police officers. So this is the city bylaw officers. And you can see here that, so the amplified sound had the most complaints, almost 28,000, but only 86 tickets? Why is that? And then you have construction noise, which was almost 11,500 complaints and 206 tickets. So this doesn't make sense to me. And then when you look at all of these others here, they had less than like 3% of ticket rate. So there is something wrong with the process, or there's something wrong with the actual rules and regulations and how those are enforced. And so this needs to be looked at. What this tells me is that the process, the system doesn't work, basically. Most of the complaints had absolutely no follow-up and enforcement, and that's why people feel apathetic towards noise. They're like, there's nothing I can do. And I understand where they're coming from, but if we don't do anything, then nothing's going to change. So in regards to moving vehicles, I'm a process person. And so when I started getting woken up by vehicles during COVID, and when this change started to happen on our streets, I called 311 because that's what they tell us to do. And then, or I submitted a complaint by email, and they would send me a ticket back. They would send me an email back going, oh yeah, thank you for your report. You've got a ticket number, here it is. And then within 12 to 24 hours, the ticket is closed and it says, we cannot do anything for moving vehicle noise. Please call the police. Your ticket is now closed. Well, thanks. Isn't that great? So I kind of created this flow chart where I go through that, where I show that we have one attempt and it doesn't lead to resolution. Well, so then let's say I am super motivated and I go, okay, well, I want to log this with the police. So I go onto the police website. They do not have an app. And I call them and they go, well, do you have a picture? Do you have a license plate? What about a story? No, it's 3:30 in the morning and I'm in my pajamas. I do not have any of those. And so again, if we do that once, we'll only do that once. And then so how many complaints are never made? And regardless, everything is just, we end up being unhappy, assaulted by sound, and our health is impacted as a result. Not only of the noise itself, but of the process that we're subjected to. So let's take a look at Toronto Police stats. So here is something that was actually presented to the Toronto Police Services Board early this year in January. They were to report back on 6 joint blitzes that the Toronto Police Services did with city bylaw officers. So the story is that the city bylaw officers have the sound level meters. And so, for example, motorcycles, they have a maximum decibel level limit right now of 92 decibels at idle. We all know they purr at idle. And so very few of them are actually charged because the laws aren't strong enough. So if they do decide to enforce them, they're not strong enough. Okay, so that is when, so the idea is that the police stop the vehicle and then the city of Toronto has the sound level meters and they measure it off the pipe. At idle, doesn't work. There is no maximum decibel level right now for cars. So the law, the Highway Traffic Act says that you shall not modify your exhaust system. It shall operate as it was initially intended, and you shall not make unnecessary noise. So in the chart, you can see the first Highway Traffic Act, Act 75.1 there, is improper muffler. That can be a visual inspection. I mean, not all of them are visually, like I can't tell with all of them that sound really bad that, they've got nice little muffler caps on them and they still sound like a truck, but it's a car. So I can't always tell, but we all know what those Honda Civics, and if a Honda Civic has four pipes coming out of it, hello, it's an improper muffler. So they could ticket on that visually. And look at the numbers that they do each year for just those visual tickets: 394, 617, 492. Hardly any for the number that's out there. And that should be increasing as it goes along, not decreasing. And so unnecessary noise is when the police officer hears it and they're like, oh, they hear a crack, they hear a pop, it's unnecessarily loud. That's when they can ticket under that. Well, they even ticket less under that one. Well, because that's hard. How are you going to get that sound and then get that car? It's next to impossible. So the Toronto police reported back from these blitzes and showed these numbers and said, unless there are significant changes to the bylaw to allow all passenger vehicles to be tested not at idle, but at a variety of RPM ranges, it will be worth our time. Otherwise, the current conditions of the bylaw do not provide for an effective use of the officer's time and expertise. So to me, this is one of the biggest things that we need to address. So what we did was I said, okay, so they're not taking leaf blower complaints whenever they want. And then, or at all times, I should say, and I can't log my vehicle complaint properly. So how many are there actually out there? So I created the Not 311 noise report. And so this is to actually understand how bad the problem is. Let's get a full data set. So I'm very happy to say that we've got over 8,702 noise reports right now. So, when you start off at one and you get to over 8,700, it's pretty nice. And I will hop into this here so that we can just have a quick look. So there's 3 surveys that we have for people to log noise reports: a short form, which includes location, noise source, time, and annoyance. The long form has duration and frequency as well, which for amplified sound, helicopters, aircraft, that's all very important. So here's our dashboard, and this is Toronto, but this is a global app. You can actually, this is, you can use this anywhere in the world, which is kind of fun. So the largest noise percentage, that large green slice, is vehicles or small engines. That's the most common noise source. Over 83% of noise sources are noise complaints are that. We've got a lot of, and then what is the other? Is the other big yellow one? Well, it's a whole bunch of things. Loud pets is the yellow one. Who would have known? Who would have thought? Blue is another other, because there is so many different noise sources that people have, and I want people to be able to report on them. So when we look at sound, when we look at vehicle noise, generally it's one car or SUV or one motorcycle, and it's loud muffler and exhaust most of the time. And I also wanted to include my friendly leaf blower friends, and we had over 440 leaf blower reports, and most of them in Toronto, St. Paul's, and most people hear them for 5 minutes to an hour. So this is the kind of data that hasn't been collected before. And I just think it's really fun to see and hear what comes back. This data, as I said, is going to be enriched and analyzed for the deputation that I'm going to be making on January 11th, and also in advance. I'm going to be sharing this out on social media. Okay, we're at 7:31. So one of the other things we do is we do weekly measurements. I go to people's homes, and with a meter, I set it up for a week or a number of weeks. And we take sound level measurements, and I'm able to count the number of peaks that people are exposed to. So behind me in my background is an example of where you have an ambient noise level, and then you have these spikes that come from accelerations of vehicles. So this is just off of a condo that's in my area, close to my area. And it was amazing because this is actually when the Gardner was closed. And so we really got the actual base noise spikes. So I'm going to show a little video here. that goes through an analysis that I have that Ryan, my U of T student, and also Esri Canada, that we created, and I'd like to share that with you. So, Bob, I can see you. I'm going to look for your thumbs up to make sure that you can hear the sound.
No More Noise Toronto has performed a buffer analysis on Toronto's highways and arterial roads to understand how many people are impacted by the act of one driver on our highways and on our roads. On top of a map of Toronto wards, we have created a buffer on either side of Toronto's highways and added in 2021 census data to see how many people live within this area. Over 665,000 people live within 750 meters of a highway. And from the measurements that I have taken from people's homes, I've determined that on average, they have 43 noise spikes over 24 hours that are greater than 10 decibels above their average. Then we created a buffer on either side of Toronto's arterial roads to see how many people live there. The dark lines indicate greater density of people than lighter lines. As you can see, over 1.2 million people live within 100 meters of an arterial road, and in 24 hours, they have 142 noise spikes greater than 10 decibels over their average, which is actually worse than highways. When we combine those two buffer zones, we end up with close to 2 million people who are impacted every time a loud car, siren, or racing motorbike go by. And we know there are hundreds of loud vehicles that pass by these residences on a daily basis. The noise spikes that people experience on arterial roads are also present on highways. It's just that in a sound level measurement, they're actually hidden by the high average, except when the highway is closed. I was lucky enough to have meters on a balcony when the Gardiner Expressway was closed for an event. As all traffic was diverted onto local roads, this revealed the individual noise spikes that those who live on highways hear from traffic when the highway is open. Many of these don't show up in measurements due to the high average, and you can see that average on the right side of the chart once the highway opens at 6 p.m. For over half of Toronto's residents, noise impacts them physically and mentally on a daily basis. And what are those impacts? They can be sleep disturbance, cardiovascular effects, psychophysiological effects, reduced performance, provoked annoyance, changes in social behavior, cognitive impairment in children. When it comes down to it, we have no defense against sound, and we cannot close our ears. And also, our bodies simply can't stop listening.
Okay, I'm going to escape out of that. So I find that just, this is why I started to do this with mapping, because we can put layers in and we can start to estimate exposure and we can start to tell the story of how many people are really impacted. So lastly here, we've got health data from Toronto Public Health. As I mentioned, the noise bylaw review started with this report, How Loud is Too Loud? And we know those. I shared them in the presentation initially, but we just basically we have no defense against sound. And from the Toronto Public Health report, 60% of noise variability is explained by road traffic, which is preventable. 93% of the population is above the nighttime noise guideline of 45 decibels, which causes significant health issues. And there's significant differences by socioeconomic status. So noise is an equity issue. Okay, so that is it for that presentation. So I'm going to just hop back here. So to wrap up, your phone is also a sound level measuring device. These are 3 different apps that you can use for your phones to actually collect sound level measurements. I prefer Smarter Noise Pro because it takes audio, video, and decibel, and it shows decibel level at the same time. Everything is there. The other 2 don't do that. But for sometimes people want to, noise capture has a really cool spectrogram and you can kind of see the visual of noise, but you can't collect that data. So some people like different apps for different reasons. So we're getting ready to speak up, folks. This is for January 11th. And so what I'm doing is I'm creating a special email list for people that want to get involved and want to depute or want to just simply show up on the day. The day is a very fluid day and it's a Thursday, so it's not great for people that have to work. But we're going to do an email list for how people can get involved. There's going to be prep sessions. I'm going to share out key messages and send out reminders and action items. And so that's just going to be a mailing list that will basically go until about mid-January, and then that will go dormant. It is just specifically for this time and won't be the same information that I have in my newsletters. So if you sign up for Noise News, you get my newsletters. The one's coming out shortly. It's been cooking on the burner for quite some time. If you don't have time, but maybe have some funds, you can donate towards a Less Noisy Toronto. I've partnered up with Small Change Fund, and we have collected over $5,000 in donations. So that's pretty nice. And I'm spending that on a media campaign that I was working on today. I have a very cool event coming up on January 4th, which I'm happy to tell you about once all the details get finalized. And yeah, so I'm spending some of the money that was donated to spread the word. This is how you can follow me and visit me on nomoreNoiseToronto.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and of course we have the newsletter as well. So my friends, thank you. That's going to be my presentation. Then we'll open it up to Q&A, and we'll take back our soundscape, and we'll also have some conversation. And so with that, I'm actually going to stop recording and say thank you to everyone who has decided to watch this video online. And that is, there you go. Yes, no? Okay, I'm gonna have to trim this video now. I was trying to do a key. Stop recording. Yes.